Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, we are talking about incremental language development of Wolfram Language, heading for our next release, version 12.1. First topic of the day, documentation for dataset.
Yes, so we have a lot of work to do here to include all the new options that Chris is adding, and we also want to change the structure of this documentation page. So we wanted to discuss with you general ideas about how to do it.
Okay, so what I would do is use iconize.
Oh, I see. Right, because rather than having a big example with a single main input and then many operations, we would prefer to have several examples, each one with its input.
So why don't we have a data set and an iconized thing where the iconize says something like planet data set. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if we say something like this, oops. Okay, so if what we do, I don't know whether this will work, is to say data set of planets example and use that as the thing that I don't know what that is, but anyway. Oh, who knows what that is? I mean, that's I'm
yes.
running some weird version here, and it's got all kinds of.
That's related to the initialization solve. It's for an
okay, all right, okay, fine. But I think that would be a reasonable thing to use. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think this may simplify things. Yes, indeed. To avoid the repetition of example data again and again.
Right. Now, let's take a look at the dataset page.
Yes.
I mean, clearly dataset is going to need additional documentation.
Indeed, yes. We are planning to work on a tutorial, yes. But so it has a very large notes section, which is separated into subsections. I mean, the information is important, of course.
This isn't bad.
It's not. I mean, it's a bit non-standard. We don't have other pages in which we section.
Oh, that's ridiculous. You can't call it that.
I see. Yeah.
We should call that simplified syntax. Special syntax.
Syntactic shortcuts.
Better. Look, I mean, this is way, unfortunately, it's a very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, this is clearly useful information. This is the wrong presentation of it. This should be in a tutorial. Is there not a tutorial or tech
Not
note?
yet, but we are planning to have one. Yeah. But moving all of this to a tutorial, the fundamental parts of it should remain here. I guess.
Yes.
Yeah,
look, I don't think it's bad. Look, it's probably not bad to have this here.
So the current plan was to add yet another subsection there dedicated to the options, to the various options that Chris is adding.
Right, that plus there will.
Yeah. By the way, Jose, people are complaining they can't hear you. I can hear you just fine.
I'm just increasing the volume of my microphone.
For some reason, I can hear you fine. It's not transmitting.
Strange.
Well, if it's still a problem, we'll. That's odd, because I can hear. Chris? Can you hear Jose?
Yeah, I can hear him fine.
So I think this is an issue with the way this is bridging to the live stream. So somebody can perhaps look at that. Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, somebody's asking about shortcut for iconize. Yeah, we probably should have one of those. I mean, I think that in the right-click menu, Iconize is becoming enough of a thing that it's probably worthwhile for us to have this.
Yes, indeed.
And that's for a different meeting. And that's, Devin, maybe you can take that to, that'll be a John Fultz Parth story.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I agree that it's time. I think it's useful enough. It's time to do that.
Looks like we have a keyboard shortcut.
What is it?
Control Command apostrophe.
Absolutely. So why doesn't that show up in the right-click menu? That's weird. Why does the right-click menu not have keyboard shortcut information in it? Seems wrong to me. Okay, that's the issue for path and so on. Okay?
Okay.
Because I don't know where it is in here. Is it in edit? Yeah, it is in edit. Oh, there it is. Okay. I wonder whether anybody uses comment on comment selection.
I use it daily.
Yeah, all the time.
Okay, I just had to learn it, right? It's probably been there for 20 years. I'd never used it. Okay, all right, okay. Let's not discuss removing it then. I should just use it. Okay, what's the other question about data set?
No, nothing else.
I mean, other than that, we've got to have yet more sections about options and so on, display options, basically.
Right. Yes. So perhaps we can have a look at the grid page, because probably we should imitate that structure, how they explain all the options.
Yeah, there will need to be an options section and something in the notes section that explains the general syntax for options, like this one in grid.
Well, what do you mean? This is all in the notes section.
Yeah, but then on the options section, the individual options are described, but the general syntax is described in the notes.
Right.
Fine.
So there should be an initial part explaining the options in general with the table, like here, and then paragraphs dedicated to the individual options.
Yes, although it would be nice to move some of that documentation to the documentation of the options themselves. Unless that's incompatible with what, with the way that, you know, unless it's, I mean, we should check that the documentation of those options doesn't conflict with what happens for, you know, for data, for grid and other things, right? Am I making sense? And if it does, you know, we may have to break down and start having some subsections in some of these options.
Right.
I mean, the truth is, look, the thing we've got to do with data set is, you know, create a tech note that explains all this stuff.
Yep.
It is a ridiculous, you know, a Swiss Army knife of a function to its benefit. All right. Anything else about data set here? How is all your work on data set options and so on coming along?
Well, it's merged. I
good.
have work to do this week to get it in shape before the freeze, but yeah, I'm on track, I think, to get it.
Now,
wrapped.
you didn't manage to make any resizability type stuff?
No.
Is it merged into the head branch build?
Yeah, which hasn't been built yet.
Oh, what is it in the prototype build?
Yeah, it's in the prototype build.
I wonder how old this prototype build is. Is that too old?
No, it's been in the prototype build for a long time.
By the way, have we looked at some additional examples? I really think the examples that we have, I mean, we should get some other examples that come from, you know, the data repository and so on for this, including some deeper ones, for instance. Don't you think?
Yeah, it'd be nice to have some more.
Okay, so why don't you ask the folks who've been working on the data repository if they can suggest some, and maybe you can take some things that are in the data repository and slim them down so they're not quite as many items, because I don't think that's the main point that we're trying to illustrate here.
Right.
Okay, so is this your new formatting?
Yeah.
So if I then click, what can I do? I click on this. What am I doing?
It should drill down if you click there, didn't it?
Yeah, that drills down, but it's always done that.
Yeah.
So
if you right click, you get the menu.
I did that, but I didn't get any interesting menu.
Or you have to be on, yeah, you have to have the hand cursor there.
Okay, so then like I can say sort here. It took its time.
There is a front end issue. A lot of box constructs are way too slow.
Okay, I understand that. I know that the most recent builds, I haven't been using the most recent build for that reason. Okay. Okay, well, let's. I mean, what happens if I just want to show 5 elements here?
Say max items data set, right? Max item 05.
I assume you'll fix that syntax coloring. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, I assume you'll have examples, even in the basic example set, of showing how to reformat a data set like this.
Oh, what do you mean by reformat?
Well, I mean, show it with different format like this.
Oh, I see. Wrapping it with data set and giving it
Yes.
new options.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, presumably this thing itself is a singly wrapped data set, right? Once I have this singly wrapped.
Yes.
And okay, good. All right, let's move on to the next item.
I'm thinking that entity value can also return data sets. So we could
It
use
can,
that.
yes, that would be another good thing to start using. Yes, we've got a number of nice data sets there. Although those tend to be no deeper than, they don't tend to be terribly deep.
Right.
Be nice to show some that are pretty deep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
I'm sure we can do some there that are, country, administrative division, sort of, country, state, county, city type things that'll get somewhat deep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could do something, I don't know, some type of thing in the world that there aren't that many of, telescopes or something, and you could do that type of, country, city, whatever it is, thing for those.
Yeah.
Big telescopes. Particle accelerators, there are even fewer particle accelerators. Okay, should we go on here?
Yep.
And is that it for Chris?
Yes.
I made one trivial change. I'll push it back into the repo.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay,
Yes.
time remaining.
So this is a new function, and I would like to discuss the documentation.
Okay. So time remaining is within a time constraint. How much time is remaining?
Excellent.
So for example, if I just run time remaining just in general, oops.
This was merged very recently, so you need this.
Okay, all right. Is it going to give infinity?
Yes, indeed.
Only for meetings.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So, okay. All right, let's look at the page. To the earliest constraint. I wouldn't say abort. Well, it is an abort, isn't it?
We could say interruption.
To the earliest time constraint.
Mm-hmm.
That really is the only type of constraint this reacts to, correct?
Yes.
I mean, what else could it? Okay.
And presumably, is this in absolute time?
It's a number of seconds. So in that sense,
In absolute time, it's not CPU time. Or is it
Well,
CPU time?
the other functions like time constraint, they all say it is CPU time.
I don't know that I believe that.
So
I mean, suppose you have multiple threads running or something, so you're doubling your CPU usage, but I think it reacts to seconds in absolute time. Because I think that's how the event polling
Can you
works.
run it and look at a pause, for example? And
can you look at the examples below? I think they all use, or many of them use.
If you use pause, it'll react to the amount of time in the pause. Pretty much guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But that's not really a time constraint. Okay, by the way, a point made by Brian on the live stream is why did the thing have a why did the data set have a non-reactive header except for the label? If you could pass that on to Chris, I don't know the answer to that. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Okay.
What the heck is that? Oh, I see. Time constraint, pause of 1, and then time remaining.
Exactly. So time remaining is evaluated after the pause.
Okay. But now, is it CPU time?
Well,
I believe it's wall clock.
The documentation page of time constraint says it's looking at CPU time.
Okay. All right. Question on our live stream, which I was also going to ask, is why is this returning a number, not a quantity?
That's to follow other functions like session time, absolute time, etc.
Yeah, I think we should probably have this be just a number. I think it's going to end up being computational, and seconds are the obvious number.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a shame that it can't be a quantity, but I just don't think it's all that useful to have it be a quantity. Now, I mean, one could ask about time remaining in the case of some kind of scheduled task or some other thing. I mean, do we think time remaining is only going to be relevant to time constraints? I think for now, doing it with respect to the nearest neighboring time constraint is a reasonable thing to do. In some time in the future, we could imagine something where there's a progress monitoring where you could call time remaining from inside a progress monitor inside some function, and it would say something useful.
Right. So currently it doesn't have any arguments. Perhaps in the future it could take as an argument the thing it should look at.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, and then there's a question was mentioned also on the live stream about a bunch of nested time constraints, and can one walk the stack basically and look at the times available on all those time constraints? I don't know whether we have that data readily available.
Well, what happens right now with nested time constraints is that time remaining will look at the earliest one.
I see. It might not be the one nested. In other words, if I had the time constraint, that my nearest neighboring time constraint could be a 30-second time constraint, but there could be something outside of that that's a 5-second time constraint.
Exactly.
Right. Tell me the first timer to hit.
Exactly.
Right.
There are examples further down about that, and that's why it says earliest several times above.
Right. Okay. So the question. By the way, why is time constraint not earlier in the C alsos here? It seems highly relevant to this.
Yes.
I mean, doesn't a function with that time constraint, doesn't that hit the same, isn't that effectively defining a time constraint? Right?
Probably, yeah.
Well, we should check that it is, but I think it is.
Yeah.
Now, in abort, obviously you don't know what's going to happen, so. Okay, does it mention?
Something interesting here is the behavior with respect to abort protect. So if there is an abort protect inside time constraint, then time remaining will be looking at the time constraint, even though the operation is not going to stop.
Okay. Wait a minute. You know, we should say, until the earliest in closing, will request the current computation to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because it may not, in fact, stop on cue, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Indeed.
We could, if we wanted to, have what amounts to an am I inside abort protect that also queries the active state of these things, but that's another function for another day. It would go through the same C code basically as time remaining.
Well, and we need to also look at, as we do some, look, cloud object block is another thing, the locking code there. I mean, there are a lot of these things that we need to know. Are we inside a some kind of critical region type thing? It's similar to the way that we do what is it called? The thing that wraps the interface switch thing that determines how you draw a 3D graphic based on whether you're rotating the mouse or not. You know what I'm talking about? Performance goal for here.
Yeah.
And that probably
so it's an event query, basically.
That's odd that it doesn't mention it here. Let me just look at plot 3D. Because that should have a default that is, oh, great.
I think this thing you're thinking of is documented in one of the manipulate controls, because it shows up there too.
Oh yeah, control active.
Sounds right.
Right. We should mention that in the page. What was I just looking at? I was just looking at performance goal, right?
Yes, or dollar performance goal.
I think it should get mentioned there. And why on earth is dollar performance goal not mentioned here? Okay, that does mention it. It's very odd. But for some strange reason, this doesn't mention performance goal. You know, I think back in the day, we didn't make some of these very obvious see alsos, but we really should. Okay. All right, that's that. Okay, so does it need to say something about abort protect here? It needs to say something about whether it's CPU time.
I'm pretty sure it's wall clock.
Well, then it isn't consistent with time constrained, is it?
It is, because I'm pretty sure time constrained is also wall clock.
So can we have a look at the last note of time constraint? Perhaps I'm misinterpreting it.
We may not have the right people here to talk about this. We may not have the right people, unless we want to see whether John is available. Devin, could you see if John is available?
Yeah, sure.
What, John Fultz?
Well, or you think he's not the relevant person?
No, I don't think so. This is kernel stuff.
Okay, who is the relevant person?
Possibly Tom, possibly myself. I'm not sure who else has looked at it. I think most other people are, long gone.
Okay, hold on. Point made by Ethan on live stream. If time remaining uses the task system, take care about clouds and subkernels. Yeah, I think this is very much using. We need to clarify whether this is CPU time. I mean, I think it's CPU time because I think it's simply asking, given the elapsed time. Well, I don't know. We need to find this out. By the way, this should reference system process data. Should it not? Because that is going to tell you things about how much time a process has spent. See, system time and so on.
Yep.
And this should probably refer back to time remaining. And I wonder whether this should refer to abort. Perhaps not. Let's see, that seems relevant if you're in a process. Kill process kills a process there. This time remaining is a little weird, but I think it's a useful vector to send people. Let's see. Ethan is commenting on how time slows down when the front end is under large memory pressures. Yeah, I mean, we need to know how it's implemented. I don't know. So you've got questions here about knitting.
Yes. Mostly a guide page knitting.
Boy, I have to roll out the elephant again. Okay, so let's see, time constrained. Great. It's an obsolete page. Repeated timing, session time. I think it probably goes here.
Probably the pair of time constrained, time remaining.
No, time constraint is up at the top there.
Oh, I see.
I can answer your question about CPU versus wall clock. It's wall clock.
Okay. I'm thinking where to put it on this page, because these are really time.
I think it goes at the top with time constraint.
I don't think so, because this is mostly about how to measure how long something is taking. It's not down in the details of of the code you write. I'm not even sure it belongs on this page.
There was another one on debugging.
Yes. What the heck is that? That's a different thing. That's memory. I'm thinking here. You know what? I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to put it here. Let's see. What should we say? Time remaining until a time constraint?
Yes, or in a time constrained operation or evaluation.
Time remaining in a running program until a time constraint. It's a little obscure, but I think. Okay. Ethan is commenting that on the time goal page, since different computer systems run at different speeds, the same setting for time goal can lead to different results on different systems. Yes.
That does come up every so often.
You know, I don't really know why time goal isn't listed here. Seems like an obvious thing to list. Yeah, I don't want to say. Time. You know what? Time before a time constraint. I think one just has to give an indication of what's going on. It's better to have a few words and let people click. Okay, but we did not put in time goal, which is crazy here. We clearly should have time goal on this list. Even though it would be good to have it in other functions, but it's hard to know. I mean, most functions, you know, machine learning functions have the feature that you just sort of do more of them and they get better, hopefully. Few other functions have that feature, although I can imagine certain iterative numerical functions could do that. Which of those functions have a time constraint? And which functions could have a time goal instead of a time constraint? This is the wrong group to discuss that. I wonder whether we should put time remaining in this list here. Probably not. I do think, though, that
I think the other natural place is the guide page for tuning and debugging.
where?
In the time part, there's a time subsection further up, there in the middle.
Okay. How do we want to say this? Determine the amount of time remaining in a running program.
I think it needs to mention that the fact that it is constrained. So like time remaining in a constrained operation, or what you wrote before, time before a time constraint.
Should time remaining work on an audio video file that's playing? Yes, but where would you call it? What would you call that in? I don't know whether it fits here. You know, this page is about, I mean, how would you use this?
Well, it's a matter of deciding in real time whether to do something, because if you know how long it's going to take and there is not enough time, you wouldn't try.
Right, but this is a different page. This is about, well, okay, all right. Fair enough. That's a reasonable thing to say. I guess that's a reasonable thing to say. Okay, could time remaining work in an audio video file? What would call it? So you're playing an audio file. What code is running when you do that? Okay, by the way, we're going to need a comment about CPU time here. I don't know what it should say, though. But so wait a minute. You're saying time remaining. You said, Danny, you said time remaining is based on absolute. Are we calling it wall clock time?
Absolute is probably synonymous, effectively. And it goes with our absolute timing function.
Right. It's based on absolute real time, not just CPU time. No, but that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Look, the time constraint is in CPU time. This is saying...
Again, it is not. Just because we wrote that it is.
It says it is.
Well, it says wrong. Do time constraint of pause of 2, print X 3.
Okay, hold on. Well, CPU time, but pause is a weird use of CPU time, isn't it?
It doesn't show up on CPU time. It doesn't react to timing.
Okay, who definitively knows how this works?
Well,
I think this would have to be Tom.
I sort of do.
I
mean, not everything off the top of my head, but...
So what are you trying to tell me here?
Okay, this will print if you change the time constraint to 1, it will not. However, if you wrapped timing around that pause, you would get something like 0.0 something. So the pause is not taking CPU time as measured by timing.
Okay. I love the comment that absolute time would have Einstein rolling around in his grave. Well, just wait for my project in a few weeks. We will have more to say about absolute time. Okay.
So probably the thing to do here is understanding that final note in time constraint. I
Which
don't
appears to be incorrect. But I think this is not for this meeting. I think you've got to go off and research that.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't make sense. If this is both, it can't be, time constraint can't be asking for CPU time. And then this time remaining is measured in absolute time. That would make no sense.
Time constrained is not asking for CPU time. It is based on absolute.
Yeah, I think Dan is right. It's just that note is strange.
And
we
wrong.
need to investigate where it comes
Yeah,
from.
right.
The term wrong does come to mind.
Okay, but so what does it do with other processes? What does it do with subprocesses? So it's absolute time in the sense of wall clock time, which means it doesn't care. We need to understand this.
Yeah.
This
We
is
will
as given
investigate.
by. This is as given by absolute timing, not as given by timing, basically.
Yes.
So we need to unscramble that. All right, let's continue because I think
You raised an issue of sub-processes and dialogues and the like, and that I think is a thorny mess. I don't think we have a full handle on that.
So what is your point there?
Just something to add to this discussion that you seem to want to have down the road about what all these things do.
Well, you're saying, does a time constraint? Okay, so you're saying, let's try this, okay? So I'm going to do an input in the middle of this. So I'm going to say time constraint. I predict this is not going to do what you think. Pause 1, print 1.
You're wrong by definition because I'm not sure what it'll do.
Okay, all right, input, print, input. Okay, so let's go ahead and say time constrain this for.
You mean time constrained?
Right.
3 seconds. Okay, I'm waiting. That was very impolite of it. It didn't wait for me. Okay, that's good, actually. That supports your theory. And by the way, that example should probably be in documentation for time constrained. I mean, it just said, forget it. Now, if this was a modal dialogue, which I thought it was, what is it going to do when I press OK? Just goes off into la la land. Wow. Well, I'm impressed that it didn't do anything much crazier.
It was actually snickering nana nana boo boo, but you didn't hear it.
I'm a little worried that that might cause a very nasty bug when there's something modal happening like that. I mean, input is a modal dialogue, right? I mean, it waits. Normally, input will wait for me to type something in before.
My guess is that one would want to protect those with abort protect.
Right, I agree.
And what is the behavior here if I say abort protect?
Well, Hope it works.
1001, 2, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. I think it's going to work. But what it returned was aborted. That's really weird. You know what I'm saying?
The time constrained
Yeah,
does eventually abort. It does. I don't think it gets wiped away. It gets delayed by the abort protect.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So effectively that we need to make notes about this in the time constrained documentation, that this can warp time effectively by having this critical section that it keeps running even though it knows it's got to stop.
Right. Which is the behavior we want from abort protect.
Yeah, it's right.
That I'm quite sure.
Okay, but what's the relationship between time remaining and abort protect?
well, yes. So there's an example in the page. So what happens is that time remaining is still reporting the constraint. It's just that the constraint doesn't happen.
So we need to say that in the documentation up here.
Yeah. We could, I was saying before, we could have a separate function that actually pulls to see whether aborts are disabled. You know, effectively, am I in an abort protected or other critical section?
No, I agree. Look, I think the right way to do that is some general function that asks the status. I mean, look, what we have right now is dollar evaluation environment, right? Which is answering questions like that. What answers the question, am I in a top-level session? If I go inside a dialogue, if I say input of dollar evaluation environment, what does it do?
I don't know.
Session. Okay. So that's the granularity that it knows about it at. But I think related to evaluation environment, there are other things that wow. Okay. Yeah, so this is a question that, I mean, there should be a dollar variable that says, are you inside an abort protect? Or a function that says, are you inside an abort protect? I agree. Similar to evaluation environment. But there may be other conditions that you might be inside of. Like, are you waiting for the user? Are you inside a modal thing waiting for the user? Am I making sense? In other words, what is on the stack above you that affects execution and returning values? Are you inside a dynamic?
Yeah. I don't know how one would answer all of that. The abort protect one is a matter of.
I understand that's a specific one, but I'm saying let's roll those all together. Let's talk about them. Let's inventory what those things are. The evaluation state, basically.
Yeah,
something like an evaluation state.
I think you will need both John and Tom for that meeting.
Fine. Let's make sure we do that. Okay. But here, let's just add appropriate notes to time remaining, and then we can wrap that one up. Make sense?
Okay. And then, yeah, I've written pages for these three.
Okay.
And
let's start with reverse supplied. Have you knitted these? No.
Among them, but not with other functions. Yeah, this needs some more notes, but I wasn't sure how to explain it. Whether to just say is equivalent to.
No, I like what you've done.
So this
I wouldn't
imitates.
necessarily a form of F, because it isn't a form of F. Or is it, should we call it a form of F?
I think this was trying to imitate what we originally wrote for carry itself.
I see. All right, let's look at the other ones here.
Mm-hmm. So this structure of represents something so that.
Okay. What is this one now? Is equivalent to.
Yes, that's the
Right,
one.
that's the reordering. That's the arbitrary permutation, basically.
Exactly, or extraction of a subset of.
Right, and it could also. I think we should say k argument. It's an adjectival form there. What the heck is that? K greater than or equal to max of those.
Yes, that one with the rule says it's waiting to get k arguments, and then it will extract those in the list. In the previous case, it will.
No,
wait.
I understand. K argument. Wait a minute. It extracts the k arguments.
No, not necessarily. It takes the k arguments and then extracts those in the list, which may be fewer.
Right. But
it will wait
okay.
until it gets k.
Okay, hold on. I think that this can be said better.
Mm-hmm.
So, such that operator applied. Okay. So this. That requires at least. What does it do? It requires at least k arguments, right?
Yes, and it will take the first k and ignore the rest.
Ignore or leave them hanging out there?
Leave them, yes, exactly.
Okay, look, why don't we try saying represents an operator form of F that takes
Takes k arguments and passes those in the list or something like that. And
wait a minute, that takes what happens? Okay, so the n argument case, it doesn't chop off. What does it do here? So it takes, if we say operator applied.
try carry. I mean, I think you have or operator. Try operator. This was renamed yesterday.
Okay. It doesn't exist in that build, but it does in this one. Okay, so operator F, and then let's say I say 3, 4 here. Okay, then I say A, B, C, D, E. What the heck is that doing?
Yes, because the largest integer is 4, it will decide that it waits for 4 elements,
Okay.
arguments. It cannot do anything earlier. And now, exactly, now that complains that it cannot extract 3 and 4 from 2. But if you write 5 goes to 3, 4, then it will wait for the 5 and extract 3, 4.
Okay. Okay, so then what you're really saying is, let's see.
Since this is basically like the previous usage methods, can we just have something like specifies that you're using K arguments and not repeat all of the same?
No, absolutely. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But let's see. Assumes a K argument function.
I think here the confusion is the number of arguments of F versus the number of arguments of the operator form of F.
Yes. Represents an operator form that takes K arguments. I mean, really, that's all we have to say.
Okay.
Keep the inequality or no?
No, we'll put that in the notes.
Yep.
Let's see, we're looking at a question from Sander here, who's asking, where was this working? Where did I have this working? Oh, over here.
Yes. So these functions are agnostic about the structure of brackets.
Right.
You can even insert empty brackets and they will be ignored.
I think we should put that as the first note, honestly. What do you think? I think that's useful to say that as the first note here.
Okay.
And by the way, in terms of keywords, do we have... Okay, good. All right. What else is relevant to this? What happens if you... I predict that's going to turn into a thing with a 4 there. Yep, there it is. Yeah, I hope we've got examples that show all these things happening.
Yes, there are multiple examples for that. This was effectively the old page of carry, just renamed.
Right. Okay, let's look at the curry applied page.
So it's going to look quite similar. I can implement the changes.
This is not for some reason working there. Hold on. Okay, so
Yes, so in this page, we have to change the second one by the one I featurized further down. So
this thing here, curry applied there.
Yeah, exactly. Because now we have an operator form for curry applied rather than a default second argument for curry applied, which is what operator applied has.
I know, so we should put that right here at the top.
Exactly, yeah. So that's my comment below the table.
Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, so this is, that can be applied to a function of n arguments, right?
Right,
Represents
exactly.
an operator form of curry applied,
Yep.
as you said there. That can be applied to a function to produce an operator form. Applied to a function to produce, to represent an operator form with n arguments.
Right. Perfect.
Okay, then that goes away.
Yes, and we should change the K case as well.
Do we need to say itself represents an operator form? This is obscure. Most people, when they read this, will not understand it.
We need examples. Yeah.
What's the K case? You're just saying we should change it as we did before.
Exactly. Yeah. These two functions are very similar. I asked Roman about these names. He was okay with them. He immediately thought of another case of this applied family, which he says he uses a lot, which is through applied, which happens to be our head map. That was interesting.
That is interesting. What does it do?
It's a function that takes in the first pair of brackets a list of functions, and then it applies all of them to an X. So it would be through applied bracket list of functions, FGH.
FGH.
In a list FGH, and now close bracket, open bracket X. And this returns list f of X, g of X. It's like through of the list bracket X.
I see. So it's the analog of through if we did FGH of X.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That is an interesting construct.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly our head map, which is the earliest still open IND ticket. Just we never agreed on a name for head map.
Well, that's interesting.
Through applied is not super clear either, because through itself is not super clear. But yeah, it's an interesting connection.
Yeah. Well, I like that actually. I think that's, I mean, okay. Yeah, we need more examples here. We're aware.
Yep.
Do we have examples? Okay, this looks good. I wonder whether we have examples from very from things like queries and dataset and so on.
Yes, I think I very recently added support for curry in dataset. So yes, I
Okay.
should add examples here showing how it's used there. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Let's look at knitting here for a minute. Okay. Let's see. What can we knit to? Well, okay. Let's first of all look at these things like construct. I think. Oh, you've put curry in there, so we should look for where curry got mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, I will make sure it gets replaced.
Eek, I messed this up. Okay, but do we want to reference operator applied or?
I think so. The operator.
Or curry. Do we want to reference operator applied here, or do we want to reference curry?
I think operator applied is more important.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just look at where we mentioned curry. Did we already knit curry at all?
Yes, in guide pages, it's in function, composition, and operator forms, of course, and in functional programming.
Sandra is pointing out that through applied identity comma f would be a useful way to pair an argument with its function value. Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm. We were planning on having this
Paired.
paired.
So the idea with paired is to take, what is the idea? Now I'm forgetting. It's
Yes,
to,
F, and then another bracket X. Actually, this could be called pair applied.
well, and that is going to return xf of x.
Correct.
I mean, it is interesting to see how through applied, I think through applied is better than head map. I mean, they're both kind of obscure, but
I like the idea of aligning it with these other operators.
yeah, I agree. And having the applied family that is a head-related headdress type thing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Suggestions for examples. Compare with other languages code for higher order operators. Curry and Swift looks like something here. So Sandra and Ethan are both saying that through applied would be something they would use all the time. Honestly, so would I. It's a good argument for having it.
Mm-hmm. We always wanted to have head map. I think it's ILD ticket 10 or something like that. But it's just we never agreed on a name.
Yes. Well, maybe we've got it here.
Mhm.
Is there another possible name for this? Sandra is keen on paired. You know, I would have thought, okay, what would this be? If reverse supplied means f xy is applied to yx, does list applied, what does list applied mean? Doesn't mean this. Doesn't mean this. It means something different. It means something about threading.
Yeah, I don't think we have a homogeneous concept of applied here. It's more the general idea of do something with this function. Do something non-standard with this function.
Right. Apply this function in an unusual way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, list applied, there is a meaning to that. That would be this. This would be f of list x, y, z. That would be the analog of reverse applied, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not precise analog, but it's a similar thing.
Yep.
And I mean, that is, the alternative is f of, which is perfectly, it's not horrifying.
Mm-hmm. Or f composed with list.
That would work, wouldn't it? Well, that's a little complicated because now we've got to go like this, right? Is that going to work? Yes. That's kind of nice. All right. Let's look at our functional programming page. Functional composition. Well, we've definitely got to have the applied family on here. Functions with operator forms. Okay, so this is our page for curry. Boy. Okay. So we have to have something on here.
It's going to be difficult to distinguish here.
Hold on. To be applied in operator form, as an operator form. Now we could say here curry applied. Okay, let's maybe, so we've got also reverse applied here. Let's see.
perhaps we can put together operator applied and carry applied, because they do fundamentally the same thing.
Ethan is mentioning a general applied decorator. I would love to have something like that, but I don't understand what it does. Okay, wait a minute. We could say something like, I mean, I was thinking of doing the curry of n thing. Mm-hmm. Something like that, perhaps.
Yeah, looks good to me. Mm-hmm.
Turn a function into one to be applied as into one to be applied. Not super happy with this, but okay. Obviously here, I think we should put it at the end of these. Okay, let's go to apply from here, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, what do we want to reference operator applied from here? Apply of F. Not sure.
I'm not sure either. It may be confusing. Perhaps construct is the function that should.
Well, probably composition we want to mention. Operator applied. Okay, we already mentioned it there. Let's mention it at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
The other place we definitely want to mention the curry thing is in function. Oh, we do. Paired reminds of J, a hook in the J language. Okay, that's interesting. I haven't really followed the post APL. My God. Well, a hook, a fork. What is this? I don't even understand what the... Those are identical. Oh, YX. Oh my. Well, I think that the main thing is the whole family of things that manipulate heads of expressions is an interesting, general area. Okay, let's see where else do we have to reference operator forms. Does right composition mention? Does right composition and left composition, do they care about reverse applied?
I think so. I do have examples of how to convert some of these into the other one using reverse applied.
Which composition and right composition?
For example,
Okay, I'm for some reason I'm a little spaced out here, so I'm not thinking as clearly as I should. We probably should do one more iteration on looking at. Can you try and surface more places where these could be referenced?
Yep.
And then we'll check on that. And I think we still need to discuss. I mean, we're not going to get it for 12.1, but paired and through applied are both interesting. Sandra is commenting that paired could have multiple arguments, and it could go x f of x, g of x. Yeah, I mean, I like paired because I do use it all the time. Right. I mean, unfortunately, okay.
it's also a bit related to these attached coordinates functions that we were discussing.
What is that doing?
Yes, so this idea of having values attached in lists with their coordinates. So if we had a multi-dimensional case, we would have to say something like x, y, z, f of x, y, z.
What are you saying? You're saying, what are you saying?
Yeah, so if we have the function f of x, y, z, how do we combine it with the coordinates? So we were planning a function called attached coordinates or coordinatize or something like that, in which we can put them all in a list, like x, y, z, f of, or the first three in a list or in an association, things like that.
What was the point of this?
Yes, the point of this was getting an array of values and then saying, oh, these correspond to the ranges from x0 to x1 and y0, y1, and then we create all these pairs.
Well, so you're saying this is paired of f, x, y, z.
Yes, something like that. Right, but we have this more flexible way because sometimes you will want the flattened version of that, or rules, etc.
Well, so I mean, then the obvious question is, what happens? What does paired of f, x, y, z do?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. But this other function is a lot more powerful. Paired seems like a simpler.
So I mean, obviously this could in principle be x, y, z, f of x, y, z.
Right.
And then the question would be, so paired of f and g of x, y could be x, y, f of x, y, g of x, y.
Mm-hmm.
It's not completely crazy, I think. All right, let's store this away in our functional programming list. This should be called pad 01. Need to talk about pad some more.
Yep.
I mean, I do really think that this whole question about how to manipulate heads of expressions when they get more complicated, which we haven't, you know, because for example, let's imagine that we have a whole nest of operator applieds and pads and things like that. We don't have a lot of functions that operate on a head. I mean, we have the old function operate that has not been much used, which does operate on heads.
Right. At some point we discussed what would be a pattern for that situation, the situation in which we have many brackets.
Right, I understand. So I mean, what we need is a thing that's the analog of double blank that represents multi-bracketing.
Exactly.
We're going to need that. I mean, that's a, you know, what is that? I mean, is that, could we have, okay, this gets a little weird, but could we have an operator applied form in which, like, for example, what if we had blanks there? Is that really weird?
Well, the problem is that we always need to know how many arguments we are waiting for. If we don't specify that n, this function cannot work.
What about its K form?
It could be reverse. So k is a number, but then what we put on the right-hand side of the rule is a pattern. That could do something, perhaps.
Okay, so let's say this is 4, and then it's arrow n blank. So then that will look for, I mean, the truth is, okay, the truth is we need the following function. The truth is we need a function that tells us what the structure. So here's what we need. Okay, so let's just say something like operator structure. Okay, hold on. Okay, let's imagine it's this. Operator to list f comma 4. Goes to f of list x, y, z, w. See what I'm saying?
Perhaps the x and y's also in lists?
Yes, for consistency, that's necessary, right? So in other words, this is taking an arbitrary structure and so that, I mean, in other words, what this is doing is it's taking a left tree. I don't even think that in this case, right, if we were to do a tree form of this, do we even handle left trees? No, we don't. And that's another separate thing, is to have tree form handle left trees.
Yep.
I mean, you know, in other words, what we should do is have a heads argument, which I bet we don't have, a heads arrow true in tree form, which means go and do something, I don't know exactly what it is, to represent the tree of the head.
Yeah, the natural thing would be to have one of these trees inside the yellow box.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
It can get nested very quickly.
Right. But so this type of thing, the question is, could we, I mean, the real thing we want to do is we want to say pattern match on f of, you know, sort of I'm going to say any structure, but that's a bad name. You know, this. And that wants to match. I mean, that would have to match in an operator to list kind of way, I claim. So the match would be blah, 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 then f of say Q there, would bind Q to this kind of list here. Then we got a fighting chance of doing something with it.
Yep.
But this isn't correct. Look at the structure. It's not correct. See, because by the time you've said that, you've already cooked the goose, because that's already this thing here.
Well, it's again this argument like the for. We need.
Yeah, what it is really it's an argument structure of f, comma q blank, which is equivalent to anything like this. It's very much like an operator applied. I claim that this thing here has to match. See, this is so weird because this is the pattern matcher uses in many cases the head of the head of the head to do things. Anyway, I have to run. More functional programming fun another time. I mean, this is something we do have to solve. I know we've talked about this before. We should put this on an ILD agenda to discuss this particular thing. It's going to be heavy lifting because it involves, thinking about, I mean, the concept of a head. Yeah, it's a complicated thing.
Yep.
All right, I'll push back all these documentation pages and try and surface some other cases of this, and we will continue. Okay, talk to you soon. Thanks to folks on the live stream.
Wow.
Yeah, bye.